For this one exception handling exercise, we're going to create a program that lists the contents of a file. First, we're going to do it in a way that doesn't handle exceptions. Then I'll show you how to modify the program so that it does handle exceptions. So we're going to call this program list.rb. So let's get that started. First thing we're going to do is prompt the user for the name of the file that they want to list the contents of. Then we get that name from the user. Then we open the file and assign that to a file handle. Notice that I'm chomping the name so that the new line doesn't exist. Then we read the contents of the file into a variable, and then we write out the variable. So that was simple enough. Let's save the program. Now I don't have a file yet, so let's do that real quick. I'm going to use the copycon command, and all our file is going to consist of is text that indicates what line the text is on. When we're finished, we just hit Control-Z and then return. I can use the built-in type command to make sure my file exists, and it does. Now let's run our program, and let's type in a name that's not correct. Instead of text.txt, let's type in text.txy. Well, when we do that, we get an exception. The exception telling us that there's no such file or directory. So let's fix that in our code. Go back to our program. Let's put it all into a begin rescue statement. All just what we had before. Now in our rescue, we'll write file not found, enter another name, and then we're going to retry, which will send control of the program back to the beginning of the begin block. And as long as we keep typing a name incorrectly or the name of a file that doesn't exist, then we'll keep being sent back to the top by the rescue clause. So let's save, and then let's give it a try. Let me clear the screen here. So just type a nonsense name. It says file not found, enter another name, name of file, try another one. Same problem. This time let's type the right name, and there's our text. It's easy to add exception handling to your program, especially to a program that is not very complex. As your programs get more complex, the exception handling gets more complex also. But again, the basics are very simple. The code that you want to test, or the code that can throw an exception, needs to be inside the begin part of a begin rescue statement. Then inside the rescue statement, you handle the error or handle the exception in some fashion. It will always just depend on the nature of the program, how exactly you handle the exception. But by putting it inside a rescue, you're making sure that the program doesn't just crash back to the operating system, which is what you never want. Some exceptions you can check for in advance. For example, the divide by zero exception, you can always check the value of the denominator before you perform a division, and that way if the denominator is 0, you can change it before the division is ever actually performed. However, when you're getting input from the user like this program does, you don't have that option. So in this particular case, exception handling is about the only way to go. We can't know in advance what the user is going to type in and if that file name exists in the file system of the computer. So handling the exception or the possibility of an exception is the best way to go. So that wraps up this exercise on exception handling, and that ends this chapter on exception handling.